Brother Thomas arrived at the village as dusk settled, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and wood smoke. The villagers eyed him warily, their faces etched with a fear that seemed to cling to the very stones of their homes. His first task was to listen. He sought out the oldest members of the community, those whose memories stretched back the furthest. He found them hesitant at first, but his gentle demeanor and evident concern gradually coaxed the stories from their lips. He visited the fields where the crops had been destroyed. The damage seemed random, almost playful, yet undeniably destructive. It didn't appear to be the work of wild animals alone. The mutilated livestock were even more disturbing. The wounds were not consistent with wolf or bear attacks. There was a deliberate cruelty, a sense of malice that chilled him to the bone. In the village tavern, fueled by cheap ale and fear, the stories flowed more freely. The wild man of the woods became a tangible presence, a boogeyman lurking just beyond the edge of the firelight. Brother Thomas sought solace in the quietude of the forest. He needed to clear his mind, to sift through the tales and rumors for a kernel of truth. Back at the abbey, Brother Thomas immersed himself in the library's ancient texts. He searched for accounts of similar events, for any mention of wild men or forest creatures in the region's history. He found fragments, whispers of pagan rituals and forest deities, tales of creatures that blurred the line between man and beast. The further back he looked, the more prevalent these stories became. Brother Thomas shared his findings with the abbot, explaining the historical context of the villagers' fears. The abbot listened patiently, his face unreadable. Armed with historical knowledge, Brother Thomas returned to the village. He knew he had to approach the situation with both faith and reason, to understand the root of the villagers' terror. Lady Adelheid, upon hearing of Brother Thomas's research, paid him a visit. Though skeptical of superstition, she recognized the value of understanding the villagers' fears. She also seemed to be interested in what the old texts said about the von Baden family. Together they surveyed the damaged field. Brother Thomas explained his findings, the historical context, and the enduring power of belief. Lady Adelheid, though still unconvinced of a supernatural cause, began to see the situation in a new light. The fear itself, she realized, was a potent force, capable of shaping reality. Lady Adelheid von Baden, mistress of the estates surrounding the troubled village, surveyed the ledgers. The cost of the damaged crops was mounting. While rumors of a wild man seemed like peasant superstition, the economic impact was undeniably real. The reports grew more alarming each day. Trampled fields, slaughtered livestock. It was no longer a matter of simple misfortune. Something was terrorizing her people, and it was her duty to protect them. "We must take action," Adelheid declared, her voice echoing through the hall. "The rumors and fear benefit no one. We need facts, not stories. I want a patrol established along the forest's edge." The extent of the damage was readily apparent. Fields of rye lay flattened, stalks broken and trampled. The fear in the eyes of her farmers was palpable. Gerhardt, hired to track the creature, examined the disturbed earth. The tracks were large but strangely indistinct. Not quite animal, not quite human. "What do you make of it, Gerhardt?" Adelheid asked, concern lacing her voice. "Is it truly a wild man or something else?" "I've tracked bear, wolf, and boar, my lady," Gerhardt replied, his voice rough. This is different. There's a cunning to it, a malice that I don't like." Adelheid walked through the village, the fear of the people hanging heavy in the air. The market, usually bustling with activity, was subdued, many stalls empty. A distraught farmer approached her, begging for protection. "My lady, we are losing everything. Our crops, our livestock. Soon we will have nothing left." Back in her study, Adelheid studied the map of her lands. The attacks seemed to be concentrated in the northernmost region, closest to the deepest part of the forest. "Write to the Baron," she instructed her scribe. "Inform him of the situation and request reinforcements. We must secure the borders and protect our people, whatever the cost." As darkness fell, Adelheid gazed out at the encroaching forest. She knew that whatever lurked within its depths threatened not only her lands but also the very fabric of her society. She would not allow fear to rule. She would face this threat, whatever it may be. Gerhardt, a man forged by the Black Forest itself, accepted Lady Adelheid's commission. Coin was welcome, but the unsettling unease gripping the village was a far greater motivator. He knew these woods as he knew his own heart, and something was amiss. He moved with a hunter's grace, each step deliberate and quiet. Years spent tracking game had honed his senses, allowing him to perceive the faintest rustle, the slightest shift in the forest's rhythm. The first sign was subtle, a set of tracks pressed deep into the muddy bank of a stream, larger than any wolf, more splayed than a bear's, and disturbingly, vaguely human in shape. He followed the trail, a growing unease settling in his gut. The forest seemed to close in around him, the sunlight struggling to penetrate the dense canopy. He found the deer a few hours later, or what was left of it. The carcass was torn apart with a savagery that spoke of something beyond animal instinct. Bones were splintered, flesh ripped. Higher up, a broken branch, snapped clean through, not gnawed or weathered. Whatever moved through these woods possessed unnatural strength. He passed an ancient oak, its limbs twisted and grotesque. The villagers whispered that such trees were gateways to the old gods, places where the veil between worlds thinned. Then he saw it, a crude marker, a stack of stones arranged in a deliberate yet unsettling pattern. Not the work of animals, not entirely human either. He touched the stones, a primal fear prickling his skin. It was a feeling he hadn't experienced since he was a boy, listening to his grandmother's tales of forest spirits and forgotten gods. The sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, casting long, distorted shadows. Gerhardt knew he was being watched. He could feel it in the hairs on the back of his neck. A twig snapped nearby. He whirled around, crossbow raised, his heart pounding in his chest. The forest held its breath. A fleeting glimpse of something large and dark, moving just beyond the trees. He lowered his crossbow slightly, a grim resolve hardening his features. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that the hunt had truly begun. Brother Thomas sought answers not in the present anxieties of the village, but in the echoes of the past. He believed the key to understanding the wild man might lie buried within the Abbey's extensive collection of ancient manuscripts and forgotten lore. He meticulously examined illuminated manuscripts detailing the history of the region, chronicles of pagan tribes, and transcriptions of ancient oral traditions. Each text was a potential piece of the puzzle. He discovered accounts of ancient forest deities worshipped by the tribes who once inhabited the Black Forest. Sir Nunnos, the horned god of the hunt, and wild spirits dwelling in the deep woods. The drawings depicted rituals and offerings made to these beings, suggesting a deep connection between the people and the wildness of the forest. He was interested in how these gods still might impact lives. One particular passage detailed the legend of a Waldmensch, a wild man of the woods, a creature said to be a guardian of the forest, but also a bringer of chaos and misfortune when angered. The description bore a striking resemblance to the wild man of the village rumors. Could this be more than mere superstition? Was the past somehow resurfacing in the present? While Brother Thomas immersed himself in ancient texts, Lady Adelheid continued her efforts to maintain order and protect her people, despite the growing unease. She listened to the villagers' accounts, trying to discern fact from fear. She found herself increasingly troubled by the persistence and consistency of their stories. Gerhardt, meanwhile, followed the trail, his senses heightened. The tracks he found were unlike any he had seen before, too large for a man, too erratic for an animal. He noticed markings on trees, strange symbols carved into the bark, that seemed almost ritualistic. He recalled whispers from his childhood, tales of pagan practices hidden deep within the forest. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the Abbey gardens, Brother Thomas felt a growing sense of unease. The lines between faith and folklore, reason and superstition, were blurring. He knew he had to speak with Lady Adelheid and Gerhardt. The legends of the old gods might hold the key to understanding the present danger, but he feared what they might awaken in the process. The forest held its breath. Gerhardt moved like a shadow himself, attuned to the slightest shift in the wind, the faintest snap of a twig. Days he had tracked sign, finding only the remnants of destruction, clawed trees, scat unlike any forest creature he knew. He found something new, a rough shelter, not the work of an animal, but deliberately constructed. The branches were woven with a purpose, though crude, hinting at an intelligence that chilled him more than any beast's ferocity. The branch was not broken by the wind or the weight of snow. It was snapped with force, twisted in a way that spoke of brute strength combined with a strange deliberation. A profound silence fell. The birds stopped singing. Even the rustling of leaves seemed to cease. It was the stillness of a predator's domain, the calm before the storm. At the estate, Lady Adelheid pored over maps of her lands. The reports from the village were increasingly alarming, and Gerhardt's initial findings weighed heavily on her mind. The orderly world she knew felt like it was crumbling around her. Brother Thomas continued his research, searching for any mention of forest creatures, ancient spirits, or forgotten rituals. The old texts whispered of pagan gods and wild hunts, of beings that dwelled in the untamed places beyond the reach of God's light. The tracks were undeniable, large, humanoid, but with splayed toes and a deep impression at the heel, indicating immense weight. They led towards a dark ravine, a place shunned even by the most seasoned hunters. He found something else, a crude carving on a rock face. It depicted a creature both man and beast, a grotesque mockery of humanity. It was a warning or perhaps a boast. The ravine was a labyrinth of shadows and tangled undergrowth. An unnatural silence clung to the air, broken only by the drip, drip, drip of water from unseen sources. He felt eyes on him, a primal awareness of being watched. Then he saw them, eyes, burning like embers in the deepening gloom. They watched him, unblinking, and he knew he was no longer the hunter but the hunted. He raised his crossbow, the bolt aimed at the darkness, his breath catching in his throat. It was not the eyes of a deer or a wolf or even a bear. It was something else entirely, something ancient and malevolent. A roar ripped through the silence, and a shape, a monstrous silhouette, exploded from the thicket. The hunt had begun. Lady Adelheid understood that fear, unchecked, was as dangerous as any beast. She resolved to channel that fear into action, organizing a formal hunting party to bolster Gerhardt's efforts and reassure the villagers. Gerhardt, though appreciative of the added manpower, knew the hunt would be more challenging with a large, inexperienced group. The wild man, whatever it was cunning, and the forest held many secrets. Brother Thomas saw the fear etched on the faces of the villagers. It was a fear that ran deeper than the immediate threat of the wild man. It was a fear born of uncertainty and the lingering trauma of the plague. As the hunting party prepared to set out, Lady Adelheid ensured that each member was properly equipped and understood the importance of staying vigilant. She emphasized the need for order and discipline, hoping to prevent panic from taking hold. Gerhardt led the hunting party into the darkest parts of the forest, following the faint trail he had discovered earlier. He knew the creature, if it was indeed a creature, would be most active under the cover of darkness. Back in the village, the remaining inhabitants huddled in their homes, listening for any sign of the hunting party. The silence was broken only by the crackling of fires and the occasional whimper of a child, amplifying their fear. Brother Thomas sought solace in prayer, asking for guidance and protection for the villagers. He hoped that whatever was plaguing the village would soon be revealed and brought to an end. Lady Adelheid, unable to remain idle, patrolled the village perimeter, her keen eyes scanning the shadows. She felt a responsibility to protect her people, and she refused to cower in fear. Deep in the forest, Gerhardt sensed a change in the air. He raised a hand, signaling the hunting party to halt. Something was nearby, watching them from the shadows. As the night wore on, fear continued to grip the village. The villagers gathered at the well, exchanging anxious whispers and sharing stories of the wild man, each tale more terrifying than the last. Brother Thomas moved among the villagers, offering comfort and support. He knew that fear could be a powerful force, and he tried to calm their anxieties with words of faith and reason. As the first rays of dawn broke over the horizon, Lady Adelheid remained vigilant, her gaze fixed on the forest. The night had passed without incident, but she knew that the hunt was far from over, and the true test was yet to come. Days blurred into nights as Gerhardt followed the faint trail. A broken branch here, a muddy footprint there. The wild man was proving to be as elusive as a whisper in the wind. Brother Thomas continued his research, poring over ancient texts and local folklore. The symbols on the stones hinted at a pagan past, a time when the forest was revered and feared in equal measure. Back in the village, Lady Adelheid struggled to maintain order. Fear was a contagious disease, and she knew that decisive action was the only antidote. Then a fleeting glimpse, a hulking figure covered in matted fur moving with unnatural speed through the trees. It was real. It was unlike anything Gerhardt had ever seen, taller than a man yet stooped like an animal, human-like yet undeniably bestial, a nightmare-given form. Brother Thomas prayed for guidance, for understanding. Was this creature a monster, a punishment from God, or something else entirely, a tragic soul lost in the wilderness? Lady Adelheid reviewed the maps, trying to predict the creature's movements. She had to protect her people, but she also felt a strange sense of responsibility for the creature itself. Gerhardt pressed on, driven by a hunter's instinct. The creature was powerful, dangerous, but also vulnerable. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Brother Thomas sought out the oldest residents of the village, hoping to glean more insight into the creature's origins. The old woman spoke of ancient spirits, of forgotten gods, of beings that straddled the line between man and beast. Lady Adelheid continued her patrols, trying to reassure the villagers and maintain a sense of order. But even she could feel the growing unease, the sense that something ancient and powerful had been awakened. He knew the creature was out there, watching, waiting. The hunter had become the hunted. The truth, Gerhardt knew, was far more complex than a simple hunt. The fate of the village, perhaps even the balance between the known and the unknown, rested on his shoulders. The air grew colder as they ascended, the scent of pine giving way to the earthy smell of damp stone and decay. Brother Thomas led the way, his scholarly curiosity battling his inherent caution. Gerhardt's tracking had led them to this place, a narrow opening concealed behind a curtain of ivy. Lady Adelheid held back slightly, her hand resting on the hilt of the small dagger she carried. The stories of the forest, dismissed for so long, now seemed to press in on her, whispering on the wind. Gerhardt, ever vigilant, scanned the surrounding woods. The wind shifted, carrying with it a faint, musky odor. He couldn't place it, but it set his teeth on edge. Something wasn't right. The cave opened into a small chamber. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth, and something akin to animal musk. Brother Thomas raised his lantern, illuminating the walls. Etched into the stone were crude drawings, figures resembling humans and animals intertwined in a disturbing dance, symbols that Brother Thomas recognized as remnants of pagan rituals, long suppressed by the church. Lady Adelheid wrinkled her nose. In a corner of the chamber she found a pile of gnawed bones, the remains of small animals and something larger, perhaps a deer. The scene spoke of a desperate, scavenging existence. Gerhardt picked up a tattered piece of cloth snagged on a sharp rock. Homespun wool, crudely stitched. Not the hide of an animal, but clothing. Human clothing. "This symbol," Brother Thomas said, pointing to an etching above the entrance. "It predates the village. It marks this place as a site of refuge, a place where people hid during times of great upheaval like the Black Death." Lady Adelheid's gaze softened. The drawings weren't the product of some monstrous beast, but the desperate attempts of terrified people to make sense of a world consumed by death and disease. The wild man wasn't a creature of legend, but a survivor. Outside the cave, Gerhardt pointed to a set of footprints leading away into the forest. "Small feet," he said, his voice low. "The feet of a child or someone stunted by hunger and neglect." The pieces fell into place. The trampled crops weren't acts of malice, but the desperate search for food. The mutilated livestock, the clumsy attempts to hunt and survive in a world that had forgotten them. The wild man of the woods was not a monster, but a victim, a stark reminder of the fragility of life and the enduring power of the human spirit to survive, even in the face of unimaginable hardship. Their task now was not to hunt, but to help. The chase had reached its end. Gerhardt, driven by a mix of duty and annoying unease, finally had the wild man cornered. The creature was trapped in a small clearing, the only exits blocked by dense undergrowth. It was no monstrous beast, no demonic entity. It was a man, emaciated and terrified, his eyes reflecting a profound understanding of his predicament. His clothes were torn and tattered, barely clinging to his frame. Brother Thomas arrived, his breath ragged, his heart heavy. He had pleaded with Gerhardt to delay any action until he arrived, sensing that something more than simple savagery was at play. Lady Adelheid followed closely behind, her face unreadable. She carried the weight of her people's expectations, their fear, and their desperate need for a resolution. Gerhardt hesitated. The creature before him was not the monster he had envisioned. He saw only a broken man, lost and desperate. Brother Thomas spoke, his words gentle and measured, attempting to bridge the gap between fear and understanding. He spoke of God's mercy, of the inherent humanity within all beings, even those who seemed lost. A flicker of comprehension ignited within the wild man's eyes. He seemed to recognize the cadence of Brother Thomas's voice, the rhythm of human speech. He slowly straightened, a tentative gesture of trust. Lady Adelheid remained vigilant, her hand never straying far from her dagger. She understood the monk's compassion, but also the need for pragmatism. The safety of her people was paramount. Brother Thomas noticed a faint, intricate tattoo on the man's arm, an ancient symbol, a remnant of a forgotten tribe that had once thrived in the depths of the Black Forest, before the arrival of Christianity. He explained to Lady Adelheid and Gerhardt how the man before them was likely a descendant of that tribe, driven from his home, his culture lost, his identity erased by the relentless march of time and societal change. Lady Adelheid, moved by the man's plight and the revelation of his true origins, decided to bring him back to her estate. She would offer him shelter, food, and a chance to reclaim his humanity. A collective breath was released. The wild man's fate was decided. The village slowly returned to a semblance of normalcy. The fear subsided, replaced by a cautious optimism. The legend of the wild man faded, replaced by the story of a lost soul found, a testament to the enduring power of compassion and understanding in the heart of the Black Forest.